All right, so now we are going to skip over 3.3 and wrap up chapter 3 with 3.4. So 3.4 kind of brings it all back together. It looks at the unit circle in terms of actually how to compute in radians. So a lot of this stuff is staying the same of what we've already talked about. We still have a radius of 1. Our x squared plus our y squared still has to equal 1. We still have our sine and cosine functions when r equals 1. And then we are still forming a right triangle with legs x and y and our hypotenuse r. So this figure has not changed since we originally started talking about our unit circle. Okay, we still have our radius, which is our hypotenuse, is still equal to 1. And then we're looking at the x and y coordinates to form the other sides of the triangle. So nothing new there. Next part, again, nothing new. We're still talking about sine, cosine, and tangent. If our radius is 1 in the unit circle, our sine is still going to be equal to y. Our cosine is still going to be equal to x. Our tangent is still going to be y over x. And all of our reciprocals are still going to be the same. Okay, so now let's actually bring this all together and look at the unit circle in terms of radians. Okay, so the biggest thing is that in this chart itself, when we find these values, our x coordinate is coming from plugging in the radians into cosine, and then the y coordinate is coming from plugging into sine. So where your points are located around the unit circle in terms of degrees has not changed, right? Your 45 is still at pi over 2, or pi over 2, square root 2 over 2, and square root 2 over 2. When we move to quadrant 2, x is our negative, y is positive. All of that is staying the same. We're now just connecting those degrees in terms of radians. Okay, so when you compute and actually find the cosine, sine, and tangent of your angles, the biggest thing is you can always check your work by plugging them in your calculator. But what you have to remember is if you're going to use sine, cosine, and tangent, like let's say we're finding the tangent of, I don't know, 210 or the cosine of 330, if you're plugging in the degree measurement, you can leave your calculator in degree mode. If you're switching it and saying like, what is the tangent of 60 or what is the cosine of 4 pi over 3, you need to make sure that your calculator is in radians. So if we look at our calculator, I'll clear this out. We can go into mode, and we want to just make sure that that radian is highlighted. So just like mine is right now, the radian is highlighted. So whenever I type in sine, cosine, and tangent, it's going to treat that angle as a radian. If I needed to switch it to degrees, I just arrow over and make sure degree is selected. Okay, but I'm going to keep mine in radians for now. Okay, so as, again, you're still learning what the connections are. If you're pretty solid on knowing like what is the sine of 30 or what's the cosine of 210 or whatever it is, feel free, you can convert back and forth as you're making that connection between degree and radians. So if you need to convert your radians back to degrees and then look at the unit circle that way, we're still just, working on that connection back and forth. Okay, and then the last little bit, just to kind of bring it full circle, none of this is changing. Okay, your sine is still y like we talked about before. Your cosine is your cosecant is the reciprocal of sine, so that's 1 over y, or if you want to think about it as r over y, same thing. Your cosine is x, your secant is 1 over x. Tangent and cotangent are reciprocals of each other as well. All right, and that is chapter 3.